We're just going to wait a few moments so that everyone will come in. So grab yourself a glass of something wet, use the restroom, and we will be starting our program in about 3 minutes. Thanks so much.
Oh, wait a minute. Hi, Leslie. Congratulations. Hi, Simeon. Can you hear me? Oh, wait a minute.
Yes, I can.
Okay, I didn't put camera on yet. It's, okay. Short video there.
It's Fern.
It's Fern. Hi. There I popped up in front of Lake Como.
Oh, very fancy.
Yeah, me and George Clooney, right?
Yeah. I thought you weren't going to be able to make it. I'm so pleased to see you.
The election went on for over an hour. There was a technical problem and we couldn't start voting, but I managed.
Here you are.
Here I am. Hi, everybody else.
Of course, Fern Luskin, the Hopper Gibbons fame.
Okay. Well, let me begin, and people will come in as they see fit. Welcome everybody to the Historic Districts Council's 2012 Grassroots Preservation Awards. I'm Simeon Bankoff, Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council. We are thrilled that you can make it to join us on this award. We hope that you've come to some of the other ones and have penciled down next Wednesday as well for the final part of this. In years past, as many people may remember, we would assemble in our churchyard at our home at St. Mark's Church in the Bowery, drink a glass or two, and listen to people, listen to some of our most honored and active groups and friends give a very brief presentation that everyone would sit there like this and say, louder, louder, about. Making lemonades out of lemon. Unfortunately, we're not in St. Mark's Church in the Bowery at the moment, but we felt that this way, for this year in the Grassroots Awards, we can actually spend a little time with the awardees, learn more about their campaigns, learn what they are doing, and get a greater understanding of what people, citizens, our neighbors and New Yorkers are doing to help preserve some of the best parts of New York, and hopefully how we can help them do this. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce, forgive me, one piece of business first. For those of you just joining in and not knowing who I am or what we do, the Historic Districts Council is the citywide advocate for New York's historic neighborhoods. We are a happy 51 years old this year. And we work with neighborhood groups in all 5 boroughs on community outreach, education, and direct advocacy. The Grassroots Awards is one of our favorite programs of the year. We've been giving them since 2000, actually 1999, if I recall correctly. And we have the opportunity with the Grassroots Awards to celebrate and shine a spotlight on the people who are really doing the hard work of grassroots preservation in New York City. The individuals, the organizations, the collections, the cabals, perhaps even, who are coming together, volunteering their time, their energy, their money, and their passion to help preserve and enhance the neighborhoods that they live in and the city that we love. This year, we are honored to award many people, and tonight we are actually giving a Grassroots Award to the Upper Riverside Residents Alliance. You will be spending some time with them, so I will just read their name out loud. One final piece of business, and before we go forward, but if you have any questions, there will be time afterwards for Q&A with our speakers. Do please put them in the chat. We will attempt to answer them. That's the easiest and best way. And we will be muting everyone during the presentation, just so we don't have any feedback. I believe that's all. So it is my pleasure to turn it over to Peter Green from the Alliance. Congratulations, Peter, and all of your colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Simeon, and thanks to the Historic District Council and all your members and supporters for recognizing the Upper Riverside Residents Alliance with the 2021 Grassroots Preservation Award. We are not a cabal. Indeed, we are a grassroots organization. We were formed last year in response to a threat to the oldest house in our neighborhood at 857 Riverside Drive. Our initial application to landmarks was rejected because they felt the house lacked historic fabric. So now we're proposing to landmarks to revive a community board proposal from 2009 to extend the historic district to include the house and a number of other significant buildings. Matthew Spady will talk about that later, so let me just tell you briefly about us and how we got here. So in August, my neighbors and I learned that a developer had published plans, actually someone posted it from YIMBY of all places, to demolish the house and replace it with a 13-story, 135-foot tall luxury condo building of 46 mini residences. This is in a neighborhood that's already straining its utilities and other services, subway station, and on a street that is jammed with cars, jammed with pedestrians, and not really very safe. So within a few days, we formed this group, the Upper Riverside Residents Alliance. And with the help of our initial volunteers, especially Matthew Spady and Joe Amodio, an extraordinary story emerged. Now, if you look at the slide on the left, you'll see the house as most of us have known it for most of the time we've been in this neighborhood. But the picture on the right was taken by Berenice Abbott in 1937, and that's pretty close to how the house looked when it was erected in 1851. There's a porch to the right that had to be shaved off when they realized they built on the adjacent lot in the 1890s. But this was what the house looked like. And as they dug into the story, they found an extraordinary piece of New York history about abolitionism, about New York's battle over slavery and the rights of Black people who had escaped slavery in the South. And that just got us even more determined to pursue the landmarking here. The house was built by a man named Dennis Harris, who was kicked out of Lower Manhattan for being an abolitionist and settled up in Washington Heights, where he built a settlement of like-minded abolitionists. And this is the last surviving house of that colony. Matthew will tell you, and Joe will tell you a lot more about that. But we were able, through word of mouth and our own networks, to assemble a group of really extraordinary advisors, including many names you all know, like Harlem historian Michael Henry Adams, the writers John Reddick and Eric K. Washington, the architect Roberta Washington, who's a former LPC commissioner, and veterans of some pretty big historic battles, including people you all know like Christabel Go and Valerie Jo Bradley from Save Harlem Now, David Holovka from Save Chelsea, and of course, Simeon. And then we just started tumbling onto really extraordinary characters. One person, for instance, Lenora Tate Magobani, who you may not have heard of, was one of the Atlanta Freedom Riders and a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the early 60s, where she fought the same civil rights battles that had been fought a century earlier. Or even I see Ace on the screen, who has led some wonderful marches of Black Lives Matter and other adherents to the house to raise awareness and demand action from the city. And it's just been an extraordinary voyage. We've also won the support of a lot of preservation groups. You can see them up here. We've gotten a lot of media coverage, including a fantastic full-page story in the New York Times. And we've won the support of all of our elected officials except for Mayor Bill de Blasio. But really, to get this far, we have had the strength and talents of our core group. And I'm going to introduce you to the first of our members right now, Leslie Doyle, who helped build Save Chelsea and Save Tin Pan Alley, and has just done an extraordinary job of guiding us through this and running our website and media campaign.
Thank you. Before joining the Upper Riverside Residents Alliance, also known as Save Riverside, as a founding member during the fall of 2020, I had logged significant time as a preservationist in the Save Chelsea neighborhood, in the Chelsea neighborhood as president of Save Chelsea. My board and I worked tirelessly and with many others to save and preserve a number of historically significant sites in that part of Manhattan. And among these were the Hopper Gibbons House, Underground Railroad site at 339 West 29th Street, designated in 2009 as part of the Lamartine Historic District. And here you see before and after, then and now. Another important preservation effort Save Chelsea was involved with resulted in the recent designation of 5 original buildings that constituted Tin Pan Alley on West 28th Street. These are known worldwide as the birthplace of American popular music, another site of great and historical and cultural significance. Okay, and while neither 339 West 29th Street or the 5 buildings, 47 through 55 West 28th Street, are in pristine architectural condition, like 857 Riverside Drive, they are of great cultural significance and merit preservation and designation. Now, throughout all of these preservation campaigns, I hasten to point out that the Historic Districts Council has been by our side, providing invaluable guidance, support, and often much needed encouragement during the most difficult and challenging of times. As a major part of Save Riverside's effort to save the 1851 abolitionist home at 857 Riverside Drive and to expand the existing Audubon Park Historic District, we've worked hard to develop an organizational identity in many forms, including the development of a handsome logo designed by 2 of our gifted members, Mitch Mondello and Nick Fritsch. We've also endeavored to get our message out to the public through graphically stunning posters, shared widely in hard copy and online, and through monthly newsletters, our website, which is rich in content, frequently updated and user-friendly. And by going to saveriverside.org, you can learn all about our preservation efforts, our history, and find out how you can help. We also maintain a strong presence on our social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Full disclosure is that my husband and Save Riverside board member Nick Fritsch and my daughter Nora both work hard to facilitate all of this. In closing, I join the rest of Save Riverside in expressing heartfelt gratitude to Simeon and everyone at HDC for so generously sharing their expertise and for this Grassroots Preservation Award. And before leaving the screen, I must point out that another important aspect of our effort is networking. And here's my neighbor, Vivian Ducat, to tell us a little about that.
Check the middle poster out there. That's Mitch Mondello as well. Any preservation effort requires community support as well as a team of people with a lot of skills to coalesce around the issue. Being a longtime player in restoring neighborhood green space, having 14 years of creating and selling calendars as fundraisers illustrated with archival images of the neighborhood. I usually sell a few at this event, but it's harder to do it on Zoom. And 15 years of service on the CB12 Land Use Committee has given me lots of connections that have served us well. Similarly, our advisors are all people that different ones of us know from other projects. Connections are key. Knowing Simeon really helps too. Now, my across the street neighbor, Matthew Spady, will describe our view of an extended Audubon Park Historic District.
Thanks very much, Vivian. And thanks also to Simeon and HTC for this honor and for bringing attention to our preservation work in Northern Manhattan. In 2009, LPC designated an Audubon Park Historic District comprising 19 apartment buildings and the Burler-Levy duplex, all anchored by Riverside Drive between 155th and 158th Streets. The name comes from the 19th century suburb Audubon Park, which covered the blocks between 155th and 158th west of Broadway. The suburb took its name from John James Audubon, who'd lived here on his farm, Minnie's Land, for the last decade of his life. And he died here in January 1851. As you can see from the map, Riverside Drive's serpentine path doesn't stop at 158th Street. It continues all the way up to 161st, where it rejoins Riverside Drive West. Since 2009, community members have asked LPC to expand the Audubon Park Historic District with a row of houses on 158th Street, and more recently, as individual designation for 857 Riverside Drive. LPC has refused those requests. Given the rejections and the fact that Audubon Park remains one of the smallest historic districts in the city, we're now preparing a new request for evaluation, an RFE, that will more than double the size of the existing historic district. It will also increase the number of represented typologies in the district. It will highlight the area's complex racial history, and it will celebrate Northern Manhattan's long history of diversity. All of which is in keeping with LPC's equity framework, which the Commission's chair, Sarah Cowell, announced last January. Extending the Audubon Park Historic District will also increase the number of designations in an undeservedly underrepresented area. Currently, north of 155th Street, we have only 16 individual designations and 4 districts, the Audubon Terrace Museum Complex and 3 residential historic districts, each one of them among the smallest in the city. The winding inner Riverside Drive, which disrupts Manhattan's grid between 155th and 162nd Streets, creates a distinct sense of place. In both the designated historic district and the extension area, building facades adapt to Riverside Drive's serpentine roadway. As in the current Audubon Park Historic District, the apartment buildings in the expansion area are uniformly of a tripartite vertical composition. The harmonious streetscape includes apartment buildings and row houses in variations on the Neo-Renaissance, Renaissance Revival, and Neo-Gothic styles. Most of the apartment buildings date to the first decade of the 20th century and are the work of architects Samuel Katz and Harold Young. Although the buildings in the expansion area have passed or are approaching their centennials, most are remarkably well preserved with ornamentation and cornices still intact. Also included in the proposed expansion area are 3 sets of row houses. This group on West 158th Street is the work of architect, builder, developer John P. Leo. He built the Western 8 in 1896-97, and his business partner John Liliendahl built the Eastern 4 in 1897-98. The houses have undergone some modifications, as have buildings in designated historic districts across the city, but they remain a cohesive group representing Leo's work. The 6 houses at the corner of Riverside Drive and 158th Street date to 1899. This photograph is from February of that year, when their addresses would have been Boulevard Lafayette. That's Audubon Park you can see there in the background. The builder for these was Francis Schnug, and the architect was Louis Enser. And here are a few photos of those houses today, with many of the original architectural features intact. At the northern end of the extension area is the 3rd set of houses, mainly from the 1890s. The earliest 3 houses on the bottom left at the northern end of the block date to 1895. They're the work of Lawrence F. Viher Jr. 859 and 861, which is the top right, date to 1897 and are the work of Jardine Kent and Jardine. And then 863 there on the lower right dates to 1920 and is the work of John F. Knubel. Just around the corner from these houses on the northern edge of the extension area is the River Arts Apartment. Originally called River House, it dates to 1941. The architect was Arthur Weiser. One of the best known residents of this complex was our late Assemblyman Herman Denny Farrell. And then we also have the River Terrace Apartments, the newest structure in the extension area. They date from 1964 and are the work of architects Samuel Paul and Seymour Jamul. Towering above the surrounding buildings, River Terrace is a visible part of the cityscape from almost every spot in the existing district and the extension area. Upper right, you can see a photo of the groundbreaking of this building in April 1962. Now, at the center of our proposed extension is 857 Riverside Drive that Peter mentioned earlier. And now I'm going to turn it over to my neighbor around the corner, Joe Amodio, who will tell you something about that house.
Thanks, Matthew. As you've seen, 857 Riverside Drive is not much to look at today, but everyone in our neighborhood knows this house. It is the odd little place you pass on your way to and from Broadway or to and from Fort Washington Park. The ramshackle home that looks like nothing else on the block. It's this house that brought us together. This is how it looked originally when Dennis Harris first owned it in 1851. Built in the Greek Revival Italianate style, it featured wraparound porches and a cupola. Harris was a sugar refiner, Methodist minister, and a documented member of the Underground Railroad. He was known to hide men and women escaping slavery in his refinery down on Duane Street. Now, in 1854, he sold the house to his friend and ally, John Newhouse, who lived there for 23 years. Together, Harris and Newhouse helped develop Washington Heights. They built and ran a wharf, a steamboat ferry, and a new sugar refinery on the Hudson. They also founded Uptown Manhattan's only abolitionist church, with support from various neighbors who shared their anti-slavery sentiments. Alas, all these structures are gone. Only 857 Riverside survives. Now, make no mistake, this is not just a home where someone famous once lived. This is a symbol of a brave community, the discovery of which is historic. No accounts of abolitionism in New York make any reference to activity in Uptown Manhattan. And the few abolitionist landmarks we have only go as far north as 29th Street. What's even more remarkable in New York, or rather what's more remarkable is that this spirit of inclusivity in the earliest days of Washington Heights would come to define this area. The townhouses that sprang up around 857 Riverside in the early 20th century drew an eclectic set of neighbors, like Kenneth Bainbridge at 823 Riverside there on the left, who grew up to be a renowned physicist and helped lead the Manhattan Project during World War II. Further up the block at 863 Riverside, Lazaros Hagopoulos, a bacteriologist, and his family from Turkey. At 865 Riverside, the Gomez Caceres sisters from Colombia, including translator Dora and suffragist Aminta, who went on to become one of the first female luminaries in advertising. And at 867 Riverside, on the right there, novelist and avowed racist Thomas Dixon, whose book inspired the notorious film Birth of a Nation. I'll grant you, I'd rather be neighbors with the Gomez Caceres sisters than the Dixons. But the very fact that they lived right next door to each other is a testament to the remarkable diversity that this neighborhood is still known for.
And our story doesn't really end there. In the 1960s and 70s, African-American families, the Baileys, the Carters, Johnsons, and Scruggs, reclaimed houses on West 158th Street, converting them from multifamily and single-room occupancy buildings back to single-family residences, all while working against the insidious practice of redlining. Forming a block association to gain strength through cooperation, they maintained and preserved the block for future generations. And then the Mitchell-Lama program, dating to 1955, had a double purpose of affordable rental and cooperative housing to moderate and middle-income families while encouraging financial and racial integration. The River Terrace Apartments, part of the Mitchell-Lama program since its construction in 1964, has been home to numerous noted New Yorkers, including David Dinkins, New York City's first and only Black mayor. Sitting on land that was once part of John James Audubon's farm Minnie's Land and later suburban Audubon Park, this building is bound to the historic district historically, physically omnipresent as part of the streetscape, architecturally significant as a 20th century answer to housing needs, and culturally a symbol of the ongoing struggle for racial inclusion, equality, and justice. And now I'll hand it back to Peter, who will sum up our reasons for expanding the existing Audubon Park Historic District.
After I unmute myself. Well, Matthew, thank you. That's just extraordinary. Every time Matthew goes through all of this, I'm just astounded at the history all around me, a lot of which I've been living here 16 years and didn't know until very recently. Look, expanding the Audubon Park Historic District is really a key to preserving a wonderful piece of New York. It will, as Matthew said, fully realize the neighborhood's architectural journey to urbanization. I mean, it's kind of extraordinary. You can walk out the door and see what was here from the time it was pastoral farmland right up to the time that this has been a busy New York City neighborhood following the arrival of the subway, following the arrival of high-rise buildings and the wonderful multicultural integration of this neighborhood. It will bring attention to a story that most kids, and I was a high school student in New York City, really knew nothing about abolitionism in New York City, and almost nobody knew that there was an abolitionist community active up here in northern Manhattan. It's a retelling of our history. It'll preserve the oldest continually inhabited wooden structure in northern Manhattan, which itself is kind of extraordinary, 170 years of continuous inhabitation. And it'll create a designation that celebrates New York City's diversity. As you saw from the map Matthew presented, there are very few landmarks in poorer neighborhoods of color. And I think this makes a big statement that yes, New York is a city of all New Yorkers. There's another reason we haven't mentioned here that I think it's really important, which is if you spend a little bit of time talking to young people in these neighborhoods, you realize they don't know much about the history. And when you point out something concrete, ACE has been bringing people here who never even thought about the history. And when they start learning this house was alive in 1851 when Black people were enslaved and the guy who built this house wanted to end that, all of a sudden it becomes real to people. But a lot of kids up here don't travel around the city. They don't get out of Upper Manhattan. And the ability to create an education center, which was what we'd like to do with this, up here with this real physical touchstone to our history, is just supremely important. So for those of you who are new to this and are here now, I'd like to ask you, please go to our website, read about what we're doing, write a letter to the mayor and the chairwoman of the Landmarks Commission and tell them, move ahead with this, preserve New York for all New Yorkers, extend the Landmark District, and help us work to save 857 Riverside and turn it into an educational institution that honors America's history. Thank you all for coming, and thanks to my wonderful team for all the fantastic work that we've been doing together. Simeon?
Thank you all, and thanks for a wonderful presentation. I hope taught some of the people in the audience more about this neighborhood, which, as Matthew put it in his recent book, it's the neighborhood New York forgot, or Manhattan forgot. And I actually want to touch on that. Just this is a question for all of you. Some of you who've been living in the neighborhood for a long time, some more recently there. The original Audubon Terrace Historic District was in that in that group of historic districts that were designated in the late 1970s as part of a citywide survey. It then took until 2009, 30 years, for the Audubon Park Historic District to be designated, thanks to Matthew and John Esmond and other people working, other citizens working on that How do you sort of see this expansion and this focus on the cultural aspects relaying in that line of neighborhood preservation, of growing awareness of the many facets of this neighborhood? Could you talk about that some? Because I think it's a very interesting story.
Perhaps I could start off, and thanks for sort of bringing all that history to light there, Simeon. When I went to the hearings for the Audubon Park Historic District in 2009, I remember a lovely, distinguished lady standing up. I didn't know at the time who it was, who remarked that when Audubon Terrace was designated in 1979, she had and others had encouraged LPC to designate the buildings around it because it's of one fabric. They were built around the same time. They are all of the Beaux-Arts style. By the way, this was Christabel Gaw who said this. She drew the comparison between the buildings and how not only were they similar in architecture, but when you're developing a historic district, you can't really stop at the border and think this is the end, because you never know what's going to happen to those buildings on the border. And each historic district, as it builds upon another, helps to protect it and make an area that does have that context and the feeling of sense of place. And so that's what we've been attempting to do over the last few years with the extension to 158th Street, now with 857 and all the way to 162nd, which is actually only completing a plan that our land use committee, our community board land use committee, had come up with back in 2007. They had envisioned all of this as a historic district then. So we're really just getting around now to completing that work.
Thank you. Yes, and this is the work of several generations, and what we want everyone to do, and I hope that everybody on this call and in this meeting will take time to write a letter to the Landmarks Commission to get them to act on this very meritorious proposal. And we'll, we can also, we all do this, many of us do this as volunteers, but money does help too. So you should consider contributing to this project in order to pay for the experts, pay for just maintaining the websites and all the things that are necessary in order to get the word out and reach out to the decision makers. Would you like to talk, because there's been a remarkable amount of public support and media support. Would you like to talk about how you've been so successful in doing that?
I'll take that one on if that's all right. It's been, Bill, everybody here has great links. Vivian's on the community board. Leslie's been involved in previous battles. Joe is a journalist and knows some people. Matthew knows a lot of people from the preservation side. Simeon, you've been helpful to us. It's really just following up, calling everyone you can think of, calling all our political representatives. I was involved in a related housing activism group that put me in touch with some of the elected officials. But it's really, it's making the cold call and then getting them interested, telling them an interesting story, explaining why this matters, whether you're talking to journalists or whether you're talking to political leaders or their associates. And it's really astounding how we've been able, this is such a great story. And again, I can't say enough thanks to Matthew and Joe for extracting this story from what, to misuse a term, the dustbin of history, and really turn this into such a great story that everybody wants to hear this. They want to hear the story about how Dennis Harris saved George Kirk in a box and got him onto a steamship and then was kicked out of his church and had his refinery burned down and moved up here and tried to do the same thing again. And everybody knows Audubon's name and everybody wonders what's that crummy house there. And then you take them around the back and they see that it was 4 stories high and you explain the terrace you're viewing it from wasn't there and they could see out to the river. And suddenly people are like, this is really interesting. And it's it's having a story to tell. It's reaching out to people. It's being methodical. And everyone you talk to say, gee, who else could help us? What do you think we should do? What would you do in our shoes? And I mean, that's my advice to anybody who's doing this. Really, you've got to approach it that way. And then the other piece of advice is you've got to have a team like the team we have, of people who've got great competences, extraordinary enthusiasm, and really everybody busts their chops to get this done. And of course, it doesn't hurt to have Simeon behind you.
Also, I just wanted to say we were really lucky in John Freeman Gill publishing an article early on. I mean, I know every time I know him from a long time ago, and every time I have a good idea for a story, I'd bother him with it. And this time he was interested. And we were lucky that the Times wanted it to be the front page of the real estate section. And that really, I think, launched us on our way to getting attention, because then all kinds of people, like the Attorney General, you know, Tish James, all these people were putting it up on Facebook, and even Charlene McRae was putting it up on Facebook. And so that really got us out there. Though we wish we would back it.
That's great. Yeah, Tish was a great supporter back in the days of 227 Duffield Street. Asa, I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, you know, one thing I wanted to remind people is that, you know, even though just my part of it was kind of like just galvanize some of the abolitionist community, the Black Lives Matter movement people, and kind of informing them of the presence of this place. But we can't neglect that so much of this project is really not going to be serving us. Like, we're not going to be here as long as these the properties are. And it was really important for me and the community members from BLM and abolitionist community to recognize that this is going to be something that'll be a lasting story, not just a one-off. There's so many stories from last year, from 2020, the summer, where we were protesting, and yeah, we got policies and things done, but this is something we can expect our children to enjoy and to be appreciative of. So that was my part of it, just to kind of give it to the youth, let them have some part of this. Now we have 40, 50 people a week coming to different parts of the neighborhood, demanding that this is an important issue to put on the desk. And de Blasio's on the list, don't worry, we'll get to him soon.
Great. Well, unless anyone has any other further questions, we had promised to let people out by 5:30 so they can get on with their day and their evenings. But thank you all so very, very much. Do please go to the HDC website, www.hdc.org, go to the SaveRiverside.org website, go to the Audubon Park website. All of these things we try to keep people up to date as much as possible. And although we can't be together physically, it doesn't mean that we're not united. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simeon. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
I leave.